Our first adoption agency prepared us for adoptive parenting in certain ways. For one, they alerted us to entitlement issues. By entitlement, I mean that adoptive parents sometimes question their adequacy and authority to parent their adopted child when they see how much the birth parents love the child and all the biological similarities.
Like it was harder for them than it was for us when they had to see, when they come for visits because they're their mommy and daddy, and that was hard. And then having all of these other people just swarming around their little girl and them have to share. It's really hard. I think in the earlier years, it was harder for Rebecca than it was for John. And I think later on in life, it was a little bit harder for John than it was for Rebecca. At least that's the way it looked when we would be together.
Entitlement is linked to infertility. For example, a few years ago, not long after Becton joined our family, I went through menopause. And one evening, John and I were walking the dogs, and I joked with him about my fertility being over.
I think I said something like, I guess that means we really won't be making any babies.
And it struck me how the grief of infertility never really goes away. It just goes into hiding.
But it remains part of our story, despite the conviction that we would never trade our family created through open adoption for anything.
Yes, and I think of another example. When I was in the delivery room with Sky, watching and encouraging my daughter through her pain, I felt a kind of sadness and also a little bit of jealousy of Kim, that Kinsley would be no more related to me than Sky was. And of course I didn't say this out loud. It's infertility again. That feeling passed pretty quickly, and Kinsley was born, and she was amazing, and she was mine. Kinsley and I have a great relationship, no different than any other loving relationship between a granddaughter and a grandmother. Except, in our case, the role of grandmother is shared between more people. Our adoption agency also told us to talk about adoption and the birth family with our child from day one. Talking about adoption, on the one hand, it trains the adults to be comfortable with the story. But then as the child becomes capable of understanding it, it normalizes his or her experience.
Mom and Dad just told me that I had a couple of sisters and I had a birth father who also had several children, but I didn't know of them as much as my 3 older sisters. So they would show pictures of them and then we'd visit. Mom would always keep us in the loop of what they were doing and that they were part of the family even if we didn't see them all the time.
I feel like I have always known that I was adopted. There wasn't a specific age or time that it clicked on for me.
That we knew. My mom was always very good at making sure that we knew that we were adopted and celebrated that we were adopted. And so I'd say I've known almost my whole life that as far as I can remember back, I have known that I have been adopted.
Knowing that I was adopted was never something that felt strange to me. It just felt very, very natural. And sometimes I would forget that other people aren't adopted. Like that's not necessarily the normal thing because it's just so normal in my family and each of the siblings was adopted.
We were all adopted. All of my siblings and I were adopted. So it was a very normal thing for me. I guess that's how our family was made and how that's just what we all were. We were the Falcos.
I think the first time it really registered that Rochelle was my birth mom, I honestly think it was probably middle school is when it really computed in my head that she gave birth to me, but Rebecca raised me. Because I got older and I kind of started going to the doctor's offices, asking more detailed questions about health history stuff. And I'm like looking at Rebecca and like, I don't know. So at middle school.
Again, I was probably told pretty young why I was adopted. My adoptive mother told me that my biological mother was too young. They were barely out of high school, and still in high school, and just didn't have the ability to raise a kid at that age. It was pretty easy to understand, especially as I got older and went to high school myself. I couldn't raise a kid at that age myself, so kind of getting there was made it a little bit easier to understand. I've told friends over the years that I'm adopted just because it's a part of who I am. It's not like something I shy away from. And also, it's kind of fun to confuse them with our amazing family dynamic.
I guess by books. We've had books about adoption, stories of our birth relatives. I mean, I guess I had contact with some of my birth relatives, so it's easier to understand when you go to someone's house and they say, hey, this is your birth grandmother, or, your biological cousin. I was told the reason Kim made an adoption plan for me was that she was not ready to quite, it didn't mean that she didn't want to be a mother, but she wasn't ready at that point in her life to take on the big responsibility of motherhood.
So I remember learning a bit through books and stories that my mom would share about how I was adopted and about how I got my name and things like that. And I'm not sure if I recall specifically when I fully realized my relationship with Terry and what that meant, that she was the woman who gave birth to me. But I am pretty sure I am remembering understanding that from a very young age. I remember feeling a little bit sad that she would give birth to me and not want to keep me, even though that wasn't necessarily the case. As a child, I just only have so much of an understanding, so I just knew that this was the woman who gave birth to me, and for some reason she gave me away. She had been down on her luck, and she did not have the means financially, mentally, or otherwise to have a child and care for a child in the way that she believed that I deserved to be cared for. So for Terry, giving me up for adoption was an act of love, to give me to a home where she believes that I would have the love and support that I needed to become who I am today.
But we didn't know if our efforts to normalize would help our kids in the world outside of our home.
I would say middle school, when people did find out I was adopted, there was some negativity towards that. But kids are mean. There's always going to be that one stupid kid that would just say, oh, you're adopted, your mom didn't love you, blah, blah, blah. And so that would kind of hit me in the gut of, oh, wait, maybe I'm not worthy enough. Or, just getting to that point where I realized that I am adopted and I have birth siblings that I don't talk to all the time. But then I realized at some point that I just have to ignore what they say because they're not living my life, I'm not living theirs. So they have no input of my, emotions. But I think that was really hard in middle school. But I think middle school in general was really hard for me anyways.
Most people I tell just kind of ask for the bare minimum of the story, like, do you know why you're adopted? Do you have any siblings? And those are all fairly easy questions to answer. It's explained to me over and over my many years as being an adoptee that there's nothing really to hide from it. I talk about my ridiculously crazy family tree, the dynamic between me and my siblings. So it's about normal for me.
Adopted. Growing up, it was of course kids are curious, had a lot of questions growing up about why my family was so different, how they look different. We all have different skin colors, so I got a lot of questions about that. Obviously, my husband's family, when I first met them, had a lot of questions about adoption because they've never really experienced adoption. And so yeah, I'll basically talk to anyone who wants to know about it. I'm very open about it, so I'll talk to anyone who wants to know about it. And of course, I got a lot of questions about Becton because he's black, and people, especially when I was younger, they didn't understand how that could be possible because and so I have to explain to them, which I was very educated in adoption, so my mom and dad made sure I was very educated in adoption, so I really had the answers, and I would explain it to them, and then the questions would go in further. Do you know your real mom, quote unquote? Do you know your real dad, quote unquote? And so I'd have to explain that. And so, I mean, I don't have any bad memories though of I was never teased for being adopted or anything like that. People were just curious.
I have always been very open about being adopted and my status of adoption. I would talk with friends about it. I think all of my school friends knew from at least in elementary school. Everyone just knew because we're little and all the moms talk and everybody knows everything. And then middle school, high school, I think some people, obviously my friends knew, but it is something that I would forget to tell people because, again, I just felt like it was just so natural. And so
I personally tried to minimize the stigma by educating the communities our children inhabited.
The first memory that I can remember of knowing that I was adopted was elementary school. His mom and dad came into the school. Actually, I think it was just mom. Came into my class and did our adoption story. And everyone in the class was like, "You're adopted? What does that mean?" Because mom brought cupcakes or donuts or whatever at that time. But ever since then, I've known that I was adopted, and it's just a part of me.
My adoptive family discussed it in every way possible. I mean, from celebrating adoption days to giving updates on the biological families as often as possible.
I remember everyone at school getting a birthday, and of course I got a birthday, but then I also had Happy Adoption Day, and my parents would come in and we would sing this adoption song, so I've known it's just a part of life for me.
Our adoption agency had encouraged us to keep the promises about contact that we had made with our child's birth parents. In the 1990s, when we began our adoption journey, there were no legally enforceable open adoption contracts.
I had a very good friend who had gotten pregnant in high school, and she opted to give her child up for adoption. And it was supposed to be an open adoption. That didn't happen. And so I was, as much as I wanted to make sure that we did an open adoption, I was also fearful that it wasn't going to happen because people say that they're going to do one thing and then they do the opposite. And that's what had happened to her. They were very open on communication and plans of how we could move forward after the baby was born. So that way we were not left in the dark, because that was one of my big fears, was not ever being able to know. So choosing the Falcos just made it a little bit easier because of the openness that there always was.
So with me and KJ, our birth families are related. So growing up, when I would see Brittany and my siblings, I would always see KJ and his siblings when they were born and got older. So it's always been let's go see Zach and Austin and Colton, or let's go to see Tina, let's go do this. So it's always been a kind of integrated thing until KJ and I both got old enough to travel on our own. But I would always love to see Tina and the boys. We'd always have burping and farting contests, which is probably not appropriate, but that's what we did. Or sneaking out the window, watching as somebody in the family was bringing somebody a lot younger in and just trying to creep out the window. Just fun stuff that we did as kids. But then when we were in Nebraska recently, just seeing how much they've grown was like a big sister kind of awe moment. They've grown into really good young adults, and it's really scary to see that.
Since growing up, we were so used to the whole adoption thing that we didn't view, I never viewed KJ's birth family as just KJ's family. It was always our family, you know. It was one big family. So I guess I viewed it as just going to see family, and
And yet, we lived in Atlanta, and our kids' birth families were in Nebraska, North Georgia, North Carolina, and Oklahoma. Life was busy with 5 kids, schools, activities, and work. The amount and kind of contact we needed to make was a mystery. We constantly wondered, is it enough?
And I know for the older girls in later years, it was harder, I guess, for them, maybe even watching them have to be able to say goodbye to Emily when she was going back home. But when they were little, it was like their friend just came, and then their friend was going back home, and it was easy for them. And Brittany and Emily were like way tight. They jumped on beds together, and they were just crazy little girls together. They were very close, and they've always just sort of stayed that way. It was a struggle for the others to build that same bond with Emily that Brittany had built with her. So there was goods and bads throughout having all of the open visits, and it was, as much as it was wonderful, it was hard sometimes, but I wouldn't change any of it.
When Christopher was old enough to actually realize that he had another sister that didn't live with us, I know he had asked a lot of questions that I remember answering. I don't know if I gave exact reasons because he was little and he would not understand the situations at that time, but he did know that he had another sister that he would have to love from afar, and they could build their relationship as they went forward. I know Emily and I had conversations about the importance of her letting her little brother know that even though they weren't together, that they could have the same bond like she had with her siblings in Georgia as he had with his siblings in Nebraska. It would just have to be that they would have to, let each other know that they cared.
I think you kind of have to expect heartache and some sadness and some missing pieces when you talk about the siblings, because there's so many things that you don't get to see or do every day that you do with your other siblings. It's been a great experience for us personally, but I also feel like that there are a lot of things that we missed out on that I wish we could get back. We've missed out on there's birthdays and graduations and like Emily's relationship with Nathan. I would love to be able to be a part of that and get to know him as well as like their relationship and their dynamic, and just getting to know Emily too on a more personal level, because we're not as close as I like hope we would be at this point. But that's partially my fault too, because I don't reach out as often as I could or I should. So I mean it's difficult. It's difficult growing up without that other sibling.
You showed it
So-
or not.
My mother knew that we were frustrated sometimes as kids, not understanding or upset that Emily's leaving, or she just explained it to us, and she's been very open from the start as to why the adoption happened and so on and so forth. So everything about the adoption has been very, very bluntly honest and talked about, as well as the adoptee family talking about it with us as well. I've been very upset with my mom for the adoption plan at some points, because it's not fair that she has to go, but then we get such a great family that she is a part of, so then it's just an extended amount, and so it sucks to a point, but at the same time we have more family now.
I think the contact I have with my biological family is just enough. Again, once my brothers got older, it kind of became easier to get in contact with them through texting and calling and all that stuff. And when I was younger, it never really crossed my mind to really talk to them. I knew I'd see them every, 2-ish years, and I was young at the time and didn't really have another thought about it. But as I got older, it became easier to just kind of reach out to them whenever I feel like, and yeah.
I think that the amount of contact that I've had with my birth family has been very good. I think that life is very busy, and I wish that I would reach out more sometimes, especially to my grandmother and my aunt. I talk to my sister Samantha quite often. sometimes not as much as I would like. I think that something that I would like to do is reach out to my aunt and my grandmother more.
I think the amount of contact I've had with my birth family is a good amount. Like, I feel like they're just my family. I feel like it's the same contact that I would have with any of my family. I guess there isn't really a right or wrong amount, but for me it's, I've had the right amount of contact.
We wonder if there are large gaps between visits. Will that change our kids' level of connection to their original families?
The best thing I remember is always laughing. It's always having a good time. It's just, when we're apart, but when we're together, it's like nothing has been missed.
The fact that it feels like he's from here, like he was raised with us, whenever he leaves and he comes back, it feels like basically nothing ever changed. It feels like he's been there forever. Just feel comfortable around each other, just immediately screw around and have fun. A lot of my friends want to meet him because I just explain how he is and how he's exactly like us, and they think he's cool. And they just want to meet him. That's really it.
Over.
It is very difficult to say goodbye because when they get here, it's normal. Like it feels like he never left. Like immediately start off where we left off, just joking around like he's been here forever, and then he just kind of leaves, and it's just like family. Not going to see him in a long time because they're thousands of miles away.
There are a lot of memories of my biological family, most of which involve kind of playing in the pools at the hotel we're staying at when we go to visit, or riding little toys and things at parks. And more really just kind of sitting around and kind of drinking with the older two and just kind of talking about anything and everything. I mean, it's always very fun. We're all almost the same person, so we all laugh at the same things, like the same things, and it's most of the time it's like we never skipped a beat.
Whenever we see each other in person, it's always just like pick right back up where we left off. Very good, very much feels like the rest of my family. I sometimes think that my birth aunt is a little bit scared to share with me more of her and her life, because she's worried that I might not want to see it or care or be scared off by that. And so I do hope to build a better relationship with her to the point where she is feels more comfortable sharing the parts of her life that are hurtful. She likes to put on a very brave face, I think, around me a lot to make sure that I have the best experience that I can have and that I have happy times with her. But I think working on that and letting her know that we can also share sad times is okay, that we can have both happy and sad times.
I don't think we ever considered that our kids might connect more deeply with certain birth family members than with others. But of course, biologically related families are like that too. It's been interesting to watch our kids develop those special relationships.
The difference between Emily and I's relationship is that we both grew up differently. So I'm a little bit thicker skinned. She's got a little bit more of our mom's sensitive side. And so it's sometimes we butt heads, but all in all, it's good. I love my sister very much. She's the best relationship, I think, sibling-wise that I do have, and it's crazy because she lives so far away from me, and we didn't even grow up in the same house, but we definitely are the closest, and we're the closest in age, so I'd have to say it's really good.
It is.
I think anyone can tell you that I'm closest to Brittany. Brittany and I have a bond that I don't think is... I'm gonna start crying. Brittany and I are super close, but I don't think anything can break that. And it's really hard on both of us. But yeah, Brittany's the closest. We're similar in some ways, but also very different in others. But I think it's kind of our differences connect, but we keep each other entertained. Like, we have arguments, but it's always like, oh wait, I want to talk to you, I miss you, I don't like not talking. Let's figure this out versus I could just ignore you and it doesn't matter. Because she's always just a phone call away. And I think it's been like that since I was little.
I think I'm closest to my youngest brother, Zach, mostly because he's the most outgoing of my siblings. So the other two are more introverted. He's more extroverted, so he's more just willing to say whatever, do whatever, be the first one to reach out, the first one to crack a joke. Not to say I'm not close to my biological mother as well, but it's just that kind of sibling, connection that we have. It's really fun.
Well, most of my memories with my biological family are with Grandma Cindy and my cousins who live with my biological grandparents. That's most of my memories, going out to Grandma Cindy's house and spending time with them and playing with them, and from a long time ago in my childhood all the way up till recent, I visit them as often as I can. So even when Kinsley was around, I have memories of taking Kinsley up there to swim with them and play with them. I remember going up there at least one time with Christian when we were young and walking through the woods with fake wooden guns and quote unquote hunting with their dog, took their dog with us. And I remember that. I remember Grandma Cindy's toys she had little knick-knack toys. I remember playing with those. And then of course, with Kim, later on in my life, I have memories of going out there and hanging out with her, but that wasn't till teenage years. In my birth family, I'm probably closest to my biological grandmother, Cindy, just because we have more history with each other. She's always, as far as I can remember, I've always known who she was. She's always reached out the most. I remember growing up, she always sent gifts, always big boxes of gifts, and she still does that to this day to my daughter. So I'd say my grandma Cindy is definitely the one I'm closest to.
In my birth family, I am absolutely closest with my sister Samantha. She truly just means the absolute world to me. We are into a lot of the same things. We have really, really good communication and are very vulnerable with each other. And we go to each other about everything in life. And she really is my best friend in the whole world. And I truly couldn't ask for more.
I'm very proud of the young lady that Journey is and the passionate spirit that she has. And I love that because I've gotten to see that with Samantha and to know her that way and to know Journey that way, but actually see it and be in it. Those moments are really, really amazing. And it gives me hopes for them to have really wise decision-making processes and they're getting to have that love for and from each other and their other family members. So it gives me hope because one less heartache is a beautiful thing.